It's time for Myth of the Week.
All right, so this is myth number 103, and this comes from some stuff that I've done in a long time. I know people thought it was kind of a bizarre picture, but I was trying to show how some MC cable, the conductors are individually marked, and some MC cables not. And so technically, if you don't have that conductor individually labeled, that would be considered a code violation. A lot of people, I had a lot of people say it's like no big deal, and I agree. I don't think it's any big deal at all. I've done this hundreds of times. A lot of times, what I do is I will take the MC cable, kind of sleeve it out the wall with an EMT, and then just bury that transition fitting in the wall, and just all you see coming out of the wall is EMT. And then I just sleeve the MC conductors over to the J box, maybe 5-10 foot away, and then transition to THHN there. I've seen a lot of times where guys will put a gutter over top of a panel and then chase nipple down. And I was talking with the inspector about that today. He said he don't really think that's a big deal because you can always trace the wire back up and find out which MC cable it's going to versus just making a rat's nest and splicing them all. So it was kind of cool. I really appreciated, talking with the inspector today, kind of getting his take on some of these. And I really don't think it's that big of a deal, but we run into, and I know James is kind of laughing about this when I was telling about it, but if you go read the manufacturer instructions on MC cable, it tells you to strip to length, install connector, and install in a box. So it doesn't say anything about stripping 30 foot off and shoving it down at EMT. So it's kind of interesting, and I'll go ahead and let you give your take, James, on what you think.
Okay, well, when I hadn't even looked at this till late last night. I had so many other things going, and we're trying to get these dang publications done and everything. But as I started looking at it, I started thinking, well, let's just take a look at the listing requirements on it. And basically, what I wanted to get into is looking at the type MC. And of course, it has to be listed, but it also makes reference here that when you're using the fittings where you're going to connect that type MC, it says it has to be listed and identified where it's used.
Right.
And that is one thing that I would be looking at. Now, another thing that we'll look at in a minute, I'm going to look at the conductors itself. Okay, and we're going to discuss a couple of things here. Now, personally, I don't see it as being that big of a deal, but I can see where the code nerds come on and start looking at different things in the code, saying that's a violation and all that. I personally have seen this out in the field where they've done this before. So, and I didn't particularly look at inside to see what the conductor had its markings or anything, but I have seen this out in the field. Now, one of the things that's in the enhanced content with NFPA link, they tell you here the sheet of MC cable tells how it's constructed and all of that. And then it said that the connectors should be selected in accordance with the size and type of cable for which they are designated. And it talks about the different types of AC cables that are there. And then it also tells you at the end that type AC cable connectors are also acceptable and listed for use within C cable. It's specifically indicated on the fitting or the stripping or the shipping carton. Okay.
Right.
There's a couple of things there you might want to look at the enhanced content portion. And that's why I sort of focused on the fitting a little bit, not so much the MC cable to start off with. Now,
So would you see yourself possibly failing any kind of install if you're like an inspector out in the field? Do you see any kind of real world issue that you might have?
no, I'd probably just pass it. I wouldn't be hard on it. I just
Okay.
don't see it. The only thing that I could see where I could see a problem here is if I had EMT and say I come in, I hit a conduit and come out of that conduit and I had to make a splice there. Okay. Now I can see where you might have a problem because now you got to start looking at that conduit body there and making sure you have enough room in there in order to make the splice.
True.
Okay. That's
Well,
something.
they actually make transition fittings. The reason I asked this, they actually make transition fittings where it's like a 3/4 EMT on one side, and then it's 4 MC connectors on going in.
I know.
So
I'm just,
and it's funny that a lot of people were saying, oh well, they make that listed product, so that means it's not a code violation. But just it's kind of interesting.
well, you
That's
got to
why I'm
look at a
asking.
few different things here. And that's why I was saying I would be looking here, depending on what type of installation, how it was set up. This is one where I can see there's a problem if I was an inspector in the field. Okay. I would
Gotcha.
look at this and I'd say, okay, well, if I'm using a transition fitting and I just stripped it, pushed it through, I'm probably going to be okay with that. But now, if I come over here and I look at 310.8A and you start looking at the required marking for all your conductors and cables, this tells you what has to be on the cable. Now,
Right.
I would be looking at it from this point is the marking on that cable because I think I've seen before where some of the MC cable didn't have a marking. And if that's the
True.
case, I could see where somebody may argue this point. And
Right.
to be honest, they'd have a legitimate gripe.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion on it. And
Right.
uh, so to me, it's almost like a little bit of a gray area. You know, I can if an inspector passed it, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. But yet, if he come back and said it didn't have this marking on it, I can't disagree with him either. You see what I'm
True.
saying? So
Yeah.
you got me in a little bit of a spot there because I know what you're asking to do and what I've seen in the field before. But yet, I would also, being a code nerd as I am, I would look at this and I'd say, well, let's look at this. But if I was in the field, I'm probably not going to bag on the installer. I'd probably say, hey, man, that looks fine. I got no problem with that because it's still
Right.
going to carry the amperage and everything. But if I wanted
Yeah.
to be a total tool, I could quote this section and I'd be well within my right to do so. So
True.